I wanted to tell you a story today about how I broke a girl's heart. You want to hear that? And it was not my wife. You know, I would never break her heart. But, so, her name was Emily. And at that time, I worked for the city of Carmel, and I helped run a day camp for children. And one day, this little girl named Emily, 6 years old, so it's not going in the direction you think it is. You know, we had been doing this for several days and facilitating these games and these little field trips, and it was a fun day camp. And this little girl came up to me, Emily, and is someone who I played with, her and her sister, and you know, we had a good time, dodgeball, you know, Foursquare, all those kind of games that you know about already and you played when you were kids. She came up to me and she goes, "Landon, I love you." And, you know, as a camp counselor, you love everybody, right? Like, "Oh, I love you too, man, all right, you know, let's go play." So, a couple more days went by, and this little girl came up to me and she says, "Landon, I really love you." And I said, "Well, honey, you told me that a couple days ago. You know we're buddies, you know." She goes, "No, I really love you." And the look in her eyes made me realize that I was not saying the same thing back to her that she was saying to me. She wanted to be around me at all times. And the next morning, her mother came in and she says, "Hey, are you Landon?" I said, "Well, yeah. Well, Emily and her sister, I overheard them, you know, under the covers of their flashlights. You know how you make a little impromptu fort, you play with your sibling and all that kind of thing. So I heard them talking about you and that Emily has a crush on you. 6-year-old girl, the cutest little girl, you know." And I just thought to myself, wow, this is not going in a good direction, you know. So the next day, or actually it was that day, I had to break it to Emily that I'm married and that this would not be appropriate. You know, how do you say that to a 6-year-old girl? It was cute, and you know, and she was bummed out, but probably about 10 minutes later she was fine. But I realized, and we have talked about this as a congregation before, and I've talked about this in messages, that the word love in the English dictionary, in the English language, can be used for multiple different things. I love my wife. I also love sub sandwiches. You know, I love the steak and cheese sub sandwich at Subway. You know, I love that sandwich. But that word is not the same word that is used whenever I say I love my wife, or I love my children, or I love my parents, or I love, you know, or I love my nephews. That is not the same love. But in the biblical language, we have multiple uses of the word love, and we translate it as love, and there are different Greek words, or in the Hebrew, there are actually even different Hebrew words for the word love. And we've talked about this, and we understand this. There's phileo, which is the brotherly love, like, "Hey, you're my buddy, you know, I love you, man, I'll be with you till the end, you know, let's go watch a movie together," that kind of love. And there is the eros love that a married couple would have with one another. And then there is the agape love that is unconditional. And then Greek actually goes on to a few more, but those are the main three. So agape, being unconditional, means that no matter what happens, no matter what the circumstances are, no matter how much you've hurt me, no matter how much I have hurt you, we are in this together. And it is a committed love that has no boundaries. That means that I'm in it till the end. Not the same thing as brotherly love. We talked about at the beginning, like, if you hurt my feelings, you're probably not going to talk to each other for a very long time. Agapeo, or agape love, means that there is something intrinsic and there is something spiritual, mental, emotional that is binding us, and there is just no break from that. It is very hard for us as humans to fully comprehend a situation in which we would agape someone. We could say that verbally, but there's always something in our human hearts that says, sorry, I can't go that far with you. Our children, it's easier to figure that out. It's easier, how many times have you not liked your child, but you love them anyway? How many times do you have someone in your life that, so we can understand a little bit what that's like from a parent-child perspective. But if it's a friend, or if it's another person, or if it's a people group, man, it is really hard to show that agape love. But here's the interesting thing. God calls us to agape. He calls us to get to a point in our lives where we are chipping away at our hearts to the point where our hearts are so exposed that agape flows out. Yeah. That we get to that point where, I'm going to talk here a bit about being taken advantage of. So I want you to take that mentality, I want you to put it on the shelf for a second and just put it there. We're going to talk about that. But He wants us to get to the point where we're just so open. We're just so exposed. That we're just so raw. That someone coming into our lives can actually access the most sensitive places of our hearts. Alright? So let me go ahead and take this off the shelf, and I'll give it to you. There are times in our lives where we open ourselves, just wide open, splayed open, exposed, raw, and someone takes advantage of us. That's the cross. If we as Christians get to the point, this is a little side note before I actually get into the message, okay? If we as Christians get to the point where we're not saying it's okay, don't hear me saying that, but we step into situations not putting a wall up because of previous disappointment, I think we're growing. Oh, but that person hurt me. That person, we have this cultural thing. I don't know what you call it, like in a pastor's realm thing. We have this cultural mentality in our lives that we even see it all over social media. If someone hurts you, cut them out of your life. What? Your sphere of influence is going to shrink pretty quickly. Now there are times where people are running away from the Lord. They're being toxic in your life, and they're trying to hurt you, and they're trying to hurt others through you. And we understand that. We know what that's about. We've all been there. Every single one of us has experienced those kind of things. And in those situations, I think that there are times where we just have to step back and say, I need you to heal. I'll be a part of your healing, but I'll only be a part of your healing. I'm not going to be a part of your destruction. Okay, you got that? We put that back on the shelf? We understand that? So we're talking about these different kinds of love. We're talking about the phileo. Man, hey, buddy, let's go watch a movie together. Let's go golfing. That's buddy. That word buddy. Pal. Friend. Then we have the eros love. It's that physical need, that sexual desire between spouses. That is what eros is. And then we have agape, maybe three. A marriage, for instance, works best if all three of those are in proper alignment and just, three flames into one fire, that kind of stuff. And I'll even compare that, by the way, to, we see the triangle of what creates a fire, and that's fuel, oxygen, and heat, So just compare those to those three, and I'll let you figure that out on your own. So I wanted to lay this foundation because I think it's very important when we get into the context of this passage. Because Jesus and Peter are not saying the same word. And, okay, so right before this, we have Jesus died and was resurrected. Mary runs to the tomb, and so does Peter, and I believe John is the other one. They had a foot race to the tomb. Mary comes and thinks that Jesus is the gardener. Remember last week what we talked about if you were here. And if you would just give me the body back, the tomb was empty. She turns around just by the very word that he spoke. Her name, Mary, she knew it was the Messiah. Has Jesus ever presented you with something so simple that you knew it was him?
Yep.
It was just that we expect these huge, grandiose, complicated things that he puts into place, but sometimes when he just whispers our name, like, "Oh, Father, yes, that's you." It's just something simple. You see a flower, you see that, you see your lost loved one's favorite bird or something. You know what I'm talking about. You've all been there. You hear that song. You know what I'm. So Mary came. Oh, it's him. Let's take him to the upper room, or let's go to the upper room. Tell the others. Jesus sneaks in there somehow, walks through the wall or door or whatever. The door is locked. That's all we know. And so that scene is over. Okay, and everyone, the curtain comes over. We're all clapping for intermission, right? Because that was a great scene. And then the next scene, if we're looking at it in the moment's mentality of scenes, is that then we have the disciples out on the boat. Act 2, They can't, especially Peter, man, you know how frustrated he gets. Peter has what we call, in the pastoral realm of things, foot-in-mouth disease. Every word that comes out of his mouth, every single time we hear him talking, it's like, Peter, would you just keep your mouth shut? Like, you could look like a perfect Christian if you would just keep your mouth shut. And that's where Peter's at right now. His hope was gone. Then Jesus came. Hope renewed. Then here's Peter out on the boat. We don't know if we're going to see Jesus again. Maybe that was a fluke. Then he is struggling to catch breakfast. I mean, a fisherman, he's been out of work for a little while because he's been following this guy around for 3 years. And Jesus comes to him and says, "Hey, you can't catch it. Throw the net on the other side." As if Peter had not thought of that already. So he does. There's a little dialogue. Peter does. And he catches this huge load of fish. And Jesus is sitting there with that little smirk. You see Jesus right now in your mind. He tells Peter to bring some of those fish up to the shore. I need to talk to you. We need to have a little meeting. And you know exactly what Peter was thinking. Elephant in the room. Just a little while ago, he denied him 3 times when he was on the cross. Hey, let's just not talk about that. I think that upper room, you revealing yourself thing was pretty much enough. We're on a good pathway. Okay, we don't have to talk about it. So Jesus doesn't talk about it. Instead, he erases it. And we're going to find out how he erases it here in just a minute. So he says, Peter, would you just bring some fish up here. I want to talk to you. Let's make some breakfast. All right, let's take a few out of there, and you can sell the rest, whatever you want to do with that. Peter comes to the shore, and they start their conversation, and you know the conversation, how it started, right? So, the weather's nice, isn't it? You know? Everything but the elephant in the room. But Jesus dives right into it. He didn't sit there, and I want you to hear this very carefully. He didn't sit there and say, "Why did you deny me?" That was totally a lame move. I was sitting there on the cross, I'm bleeding and I'm dying and I'm giving myself away, but you, Peter, like I predicted, I knew you would do this. You, Peter, decided to deny me. I heard everything. That is not what Jesus says. And I think that when we sin, when we have missed the mark, we assume that Jesus is saying something to us that He's not saying. Jesus doesn't come to us and say, "You big bonehead, why did you do that?" This is what Jesus says. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you truly love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," he said. "You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my lambs." I want to stop right there. We go on to the story. And Jesus asks him, "Do you love me?" Peter says, "Yeah, I love you." Do you remember the words for love? In the actual Greek, if you break this down, Jesus is saying, "Do you agape me? Do you love me unconditionally? Will you be with me till the end? Will you do everything I've asked you to do? Will you obey?" That's the context. I'm not making this up. And Peter comes back to him and he's, uncomfortable, sweaty palms, little maybe red-faced. "Yeah, you're a great friend." He didn't answer the question. You're my buddy. "Do you agape me?" "Oh, I phileo." And Jesus says, "Okay. Maybe Peter's not great in communication. Then feed my lambs." So we go on to the rest of the story, and Jesus asks 2 more times, "Do you love me?" At first, "Do you love me more than these?" Part of the conversation. It was easy to understand in the context. Now Jesus is getting direct. "Do you love me?" The second time, Peter pipes up, "I just told you we're buddies, man. Remember all the good times we've had?" Peter, when we think about this phileo, when we think about brotherly love or sisterly love, we think about the good times, right? Remember when you were kids and you used to hop in the back of the pickup truck and go in the middle of the night and go paintballing, or brothers, brotherly love. Those are my buddies. Jesus is not talking about, let's reminisce on the good times. He's talking about, do you love me no matter what? So Jesus doesn't come to Peter and say, "You big bonehead, why did you do these things? Like I told you that you were going to do them. I know you. I knew you were going to do it." This is not who Jesus is. He simply asks the question to us and to Peter, "Do you love me? With everything that you are? Do you hold anything off limits to me? Do you justify what you do so that you can, we're buddies, When Jesus confronts you, sitting here at Fishers Point Community Church on Sunday, April 28th, the year of our Lord 2019. When He confronts you with that question, what do you say back to Him? He says, "Do you love me?" "Well, I go to church. I put a 20 in the offering every once in a while. Lord, come on." And Jesus stands there in front of us and He thinks for a minute and says, "Okay, how about you obey? How about you care for the lost? How about you care for those who I care about? If you truly love me, then feed my sheep. It's very interesting when we get into the context of this, because we can look at Peter all day, and I say this all the time, especially when I talk about Peter. Peter, come on, he was right in front of you. He died and he was resurrected. Now, I don't know whether Peter was just nervous, or maybe he was just being brutally honest. Maybe, and now let's go that direction for a minute. Maybe Peter was just saying to himself, hey, I know exactly what I've been through. I know what I did to you. I knew what I did in front of you. If I were to be honest with you, maybe I don't love you as much as I thought. I don't know. It doesn't really tell us what he was thinking. Peter gets so frustrated with this conversation, though, so we know that there's a little bit in this context that maybe steers us away from what I just said. He gets so frustrated, and he starts, in the context, starts kind of getting louder. You know I love you. Okay. Then feed my sheep. I want you, as my follower, now that we've established that you love me, I want you as my follower to be commissioned, and I want you to be ready for whatever I call you to do. Peter, I want you to be so on fire for me that whenever you see someone dying and sick and without enough, that you just jump in and you say, I'm here. I'm Jesus extended. I want you to have such a passion for those who don't know me that you will spend your life bringing people to me. Yeah. And the context here, and we see at the very end of this passage that we read today, that Peter is even going to give his life for this cause. How much do you love God? Now, before you hear that through a legalistic lens, how many things are you doing? Make sure you do these things. Make sure you don't do these things. I am not saying that whatsoever. What I am saying is you have to ask yourself this question. And it has to go beyond, buddy, hey, remember the good times. I remember when you saved me, Lord. Oh, man, I remember so many years ago back in that conference center. I remember the good times, but do you remember the bad times as well? Where you shook your fist at God and you said, why aren't you helping me here? Why aren't you changing this circumstance? Do you remember that? And you also remember right after that how faithful God was. Do you remember the valleys? Do you remember the mountaintops? Do you remember the hurting? And you can't really explain why they're hurting. And you can't tell them, suffering happens, I don't know, fallen world. Are you with him in that as well? We're just not fair weather fans of Jesus. That we trudge through, we put our boots on, and we get walking. And walk through all of the stuff. The answer to this is no. I was about to ask you, do you love God as much as he loves you? Of course not. That's impossible. But can we at least first acknowledge that he loves us unconditionally? Right. No bounds, no boundaries, nothing like that. And if he calls us to love like that, then there are going to be times where we are absolutely heartbroken and disappointed and people hurt us. I just want to point out, like when I pointed to the cross earlier, there was a specific demographic that hurt and killed Jesus. And that specific demographic was those that he loved. to narrow it down a little bit, you know. It wasn't the people who remembered the good old times either. So, I guess if I were to give a challenge today, it would be this. Ask yourself that question. If someone were to, this is a big pastor word, exegete my life, and exegete just means take it, analyze it, pull it apart, study it. If someone were to exegete my life, would it compel them to follow Jesus? If someone were following me around, taking notes of my private and public life, would those things help them to see Jesus more clearly? Not legalism here. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about, quit doing this and start doing this. What I am talking about is, let's get serious if we are saying we love Jesus.
Amen.
Let's quit messing around. Let's go all in or not. This is not dipping the toe in the water. Because Jesus loves you fully. Having a compassion and love for those around us, those who know Jesus and those who don't know Jesus, those who are wealthy and those who are struggling, those who don't have enough and those who have a lot to give away. Jesus doesn't come and say, well, you're a suburban middle class community, so I think I'll pass over you. No, he wants everyone to know him. And to those who know him, to know him more.
Right.
And to those who know him more than I do, for them to know him even more.
Right.
Ask yourself the question. Let's just start there. Do I truly love God? And am I serious? And if God tells me today, if God were standing right in front of me and said, I love you, what would our response be? Thanks. Have you ever been dating someone and it's gotten to that point in the relationship where one of them says the word, they have courage? It's a long-term relationship, you know this is going somewhere. You've been on so many dates, and finally you have an affinity for that person. One person just steps up and it's the courage that I love you. And we've all seen it on the movies, right? The romantic comedies and the things that we watch on TV. We've all seen it where the other person is like, hey, wasn't ready for that. And the storyline is about heartbreaking and devastation and like how they're not on the same page. I want us, as Fishers Point Community Church, to be on the same page with Jesus.
Right.
When he says, I love you, we say, I love you too.
Amen.
What does that look like for you? I've said this 3 times already. I'm not saying legalism. I'm not putting that in there. But I guess the only thing I can say about this is that the implication is there might be some things in your life that you might choose to change because you're like, well, I'm not really loving Jesus very well in this context. Do we see the difference? Legalism, you are doing things to make me happy as your pastor. Love is that you're just throwing it all away because he's the only one you care about.
Yeah.
And because you care about him so much, you care about everybody else.
Right.
Legalism, okay, please don't rush the stage after I say this, but I'm praying about in my mind right now whether I should even say this. Legalism makes your grandma happy. Love makes Jesus happy. Okay, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. All right. The altars are open. I know that someone has some business to do. Maybe you want to do it at your seat, and up here, let's find it. We use this area as the altar. But just listen to him and obey. Don't just hear, but follow through.